and it let out this blood-curdling, guttural scream.
On the side of the road, he sees a deer carcass and something eating on it, which he thought was a bear. And as the lights hit it, it stood up. And, like, this gives me chills talking about it. He said it stood up and it had the face of a man.
Hello and welcome to another episode of the Bigfoots of America podcast show. I'm your host, Bryan Sawyer. Today is episode 24 with Jerry, the Survivor Man Millwood. I met Jerry through, we've got another national podcast show on the Channel 12 TV network out of Las Vegas. It's a worldwide streaming platform, kind of like a Hulu. But I met Jerry on what's called the NCI team, the North Carolina Investigates team, all things paranormal. And, you know, this guy is a brother from another mother. You know, he's got the Christian background like I do. Our job kind of is to be open-minded and hear everybody's point of view and not ostracize anyone, you know. But somehow insert the gospel or the message of Jesus Christ, because for me, that has always been a challenge to me, because growing up as a Christian, I had never heard of Bigfoot until the Patterson-Gimlin film, you know, and then I started having all the ghost encounters myself. And then, as I always say, 5-6 years ago, I had a fairy encounter where I opened my eyes to a fairy floating right over my face, you know, about the size of my hand, and it had spoken to me and I replied. But that's another day, that's another story. But Jerry is so awesome because we're kind of kindred bloods in the sense that, all right, it's our job to show people that, yes, all this paranormal activity actually does connect to the Bible and the message of Jesus Christ. So, yeah, that's it, man. So, Jerry I met on the NCI team. Let's tell you a little bit about Jerry. He's been an enthusiast like me since he was a boy, but he's been a researcher and investigator since for about 8 years now. And he lives in, I think, Kaiser, North Carolina is how he pronounced it. He can correct me when he comes on. But hey, with that said, man, let's go ahead and get Jerry in here. So excited. Such a knowledgeable man. Hey, Jerry, you there?
Yes, sir. I'm here, brother. Good to see you.
Good to see you too, man.
And it's great to be here.
Definitely, brother. Definitely. I want to thank you first for being a friend. You know, I talk a lot sometimes. You have a lot of patience with me, and I appreciate that. But today is really about me shutting up and us getting your story. So without further ado, as I always say, man, I want you to just go ahead and tell us what your life's been about, you know, how you got involved in all this paranormal activity, man. Go ahead.
Okay. Well, and let me just say that I feel the same, the kindred connection that that we know we share, and that's awesome. And it's great when the first night that we did that show together, I felt that connection. And when you talk, you always have something impactful to say. So I don't have patience with you. I shut up and listen to you.
I appreciate that.
Well, let's see. I was born and raised in the western half of North Carolina, outside in the country, outside a little town called Bessemer City, North Carolina, and I had a big sports background. My dad played semi-pro baseball, and several of my uncles did. My cousin Kevin pitched in the major leagues for 16 years. But starting at an early age, my dad became an evangelist, a preacher. And so we were raised raised in a household with a preacher and a preacher's wife. And then I graduated high school and I signed up for the Army in my junior year. I was ready to go. I knew I wanted to do that. And I left about a month after I graduated and went into the military. I stayed on active duty 4 years. Joined the National Guard before I ever got off active duty. And once I come off active duty, from then on, I always had a relationship with either the Army Reserve or Army National Guard, all the way up to 2003 when I got out. I attended college, UNC Charlotte, and majored in criminal justice and minor in psychology, and worked for the state court system and retired when I was 50. And that's just the boring stuff. The exciting stuff starts when I was a little kid. My grandpa took me to see Legend of Boggy Creek. Now that movie ran for years around here at drive-ins, at our little tiny theaters we had at the time. So he took me to see Legend of Boggy Creek, and I was hooked. When I was 10 years old, I bought this book at the Scholastic Book Fair at my school. And I read it. I bet I've read it 50 times. And so between the movie and this, it ignited this amazement for me. And it was, I don't know, it just intrigued me, the idea of these unknown creatures living out there. But I was just a fan. It was entertainment, more or less, until August of 2017. My wife and I were coming home late from church on a Thursday night, about 9:30, and we turned on our dead-end road. And there, standing beside the cornfield, was a humongous Bigfoot. He was massive, and I was taken aback. I literally was in vapor lock for a minute, and I got the car stopped, and my wife said, "Hurry up! He just turned. He's going into the corn." And I backed the car up to shine the light on the corn. Now we got a really good look at this creature, and he went into the corn, and for just 30 seconds or so, I could see his head above the corn. He was taller than the full-grown corn stalks, obviously.
Wow.
Probably 8 foot, somewhere in that. But his shoulders, Bryan, his shoulders is what struck me, so massively wide. And I almost felt emotional. I didn't know whether to smile about it or laugh. I don't know. I can't describe how I felt at the time. And my wife equally was amazed. And so that night, it went from being entertainment to me, and I had to start trying to find answers, especially for the local lore that we have concerning the creatures that we have here in the South Mountains area. I began voraciously reading. I started going into woods more. I had already been finding tree breaks, but honestly, I didn't think, prior to seeing one, I didn't think a whole lot about it. I said it could be, might be, but it didn't make much impact on me. But then I knew what was making those tree breaks. I stayed in the woods, and I started, there was a tough nut to crack, and here's what it was. Getting some of the local people here to talk to me about their experiences, because this area is known for cryptids. It's known for supernatural activity in general. And little by little, I gained the trust of a couple old timers, and they opened up to me over a course of a couple of years. And then, I would meet somebody else and begin to talk to them. Finally, a couple of my neighbors started talking to me about it, because everybody that lives on my dead-end road, this is taboo to talk about. But my neighbors, my good friends that hang around me, and they started talking about their experiences. And so I started a part-time job at a little country store here in Kaiser. And a country store in a little town is like that's like the news center. We don't have a town hall.
Sure.
Kaiser's too small. So, the store is where everybody comes to talk and catch up with each other and that kind of thing. And Fox Nation was coming to town, and they were going to do a documentary. And it was about knobby, which is what we call our Bigfoots here in the South Mountains. We call them knobbies. The lady that owned the store called me and she said, Jerry, because she knew me well, I went to church with her and she knew my interest and the work I had been doing. She said, would you be willing to interview for this documentary? It's called Monsters Across America. And I said, let me think about it. She gave me the number for the producer out in LA. And I called him. I said, I'll do it. But I want to be silhouetted and I'd like for you to disguise my voice. Because at the time, I wasn't about just openly talking about it. You know, that was a progression.
Sure,
now,
sure.
I'll walk up to a stranger in Applebee's and talk about it. But so they shot the interview. One of the people that was supposed to be interviewing kind of got whizzed off and he left the set. So that doubled my time. And it went well. It was great. They treated the subject, you know, with sincerity. It wasn't tongue in cheek. In January of 2021, the documentary came out. They silhouetted me, but they did not disguise my voice.
Oh.
Everybody in 3 counties knew the dude on this documentary is that preacher guy that works at the store.
Right.
And so I anticipated, you know, maybe getting teased, made fun of, but only one person kind of gave me a hard time. But here's what it turned into. People started coming up to the store just to talk to me about their experiences. And
Fantastic.
first it was a couple trickled in, a few, one here, one there, and next thing I knew, you know, fast forward a year later, I had several legal pads full of notes on it really wasn't an interview. The people would just tell me their story, and if I had some questions, you know, I would ask them. And I promised the ones that wanted anonymity, I gave them my word on that. Some of them said they didn't care if I used their name.
Is it stigma, Jerry? Is it stigma? People just are, and I get it, man. You know, going back to the day, yeah, you were made fun of. So yeah, is that it? Stigma, the whole stigma. You don't want to be associated. You might be called crazy.
Yeah, it's that. Plus, you got to understand the culture of mountain folk, Appalachian mountain folk. They can be real closed mouth about things that they feel are controversial or that they don't want to talk about. And the cryptids, even the ghost stories that I've heard, a lot of ghost stories, the weird lights, UFOs, things like that. They just, most of them tend to treat it as taboo to talk about. We don't talk about it. And, you know, I've got people that I've known for 15 years here that I know have had an experience because somebody told me, but they yet to open up to me about it. It's a strange culture. It's a good culture, but you have really got to win people's trust to get them to talk about stuff like this. And I'm still doing that. I'm still, you know, I'm patient. I'm not going to be pushy. Gosh, I've got enough content for another year's worth if I do one episode a week on my show of stories that people have told.
Fantastic.
So I'm not going to be pushy. I just finished an investigation of the time period of 1978 to 1979 here in the South Mountains area. There was just an outbreak of sightings. And it was very, very impactful sightings. And from the evidence, from all the interviews, from people I've talked to, what they were seeing, there was a single juvenile Sasquatch that had, for whatever reason, come out of the deep woods in the interior of the South Mountains and was just day or night was showing himself. And a lot of vocalizations, especially at night, that people were hearing. But there's a couple of twists to this, and this is the only second time that I've talked about it on air. But my friend Dwight Campbell, who's in Sasquatch Recon with me and Tim Deals and some other people, he found an old documentary, Bryan, and it was filmed 1980 by a man from Tennessee. This man from Tennessee came here and he interviewed a bunch of witnesses. Now, there were witnesses I needed to talk to, but I couldn't interview them because they were dead. But those witnesses that I wanted to talk to were interviewed by that man on camera. So the information I needed just fell out of the heavens. And so here's what it turned out. They were hearing these classic Bigfoot vocalizations, but people were also reporting this scream, this like a woman screaming at night, usually from up on top of one of the mountains. And then there was another vocalization people were reporting that was more of a howling wail. And this wail would end, it almost sounded like yodeling. And I thought, that's a strange one. So anyway, when I watched this documentary, it became clear what was going on. You had the juvenile Sasquatch making its rounds. There was at least several dozen witnesses that we know of, not counting the people who never came forward. But there was also at the time a black panther, a big black mountain cat. We call them panthers, but they're a mountain lion, and they're usually black in color. We had a male black panther that was on the loose during that time period. He had come out of the mountains, and they do that frequently. That's not highly unusual. But the footprints they were finding, they found Sasquatch tracks. They found panther tracks. But they found these huge tracks, bigger. I saw, they showed the picture of a cast of one of these tracks, and it was bigger than my hand. And the trackers, these old school Appalachian mountain men who knew how to track animals, said, that's a canine print. It's got some weird characteristics, maybe a little bit, put you in mind of a feline characteristic, but it's a dog track, except that big. And so I found an interview with a lady, and she's passed on now. Her name is Argel Knight. And here's what cracked it open. 10:30 in the morning, she was riding up the road 3 miles from where I live, broad daylight, and she saw ahead in the road, Bryan, what she thought was a huge black dog. But as she got closer, she immediately realized it was not a domesticated canine. This thing was walking on all fours. It was huge, and she drove past it, and it was looking, its face was up, looking down in her window at her. So,
oh my goodness.
So the third thing we had going on during that time period, the juvenile Sasquatch, we had the panther, we had a dog man. And that was that wailing sound that ended in the yodel. And the screaming sound, that was the panther. The other sounds obviously were the Bigfoot. And I think that based on the interviews and the things that I've learned from people I've talked to, a lot of the vocalizations that night were from different areas at the same time, and I believe they were trying to call that juvenile Sasquatch back to the safety of the deep woods. So that's where I'm at now. That I just finished that project up about 2 weeks ago.
That's crazy. You know, I wonder how tall that dog man was. If it stood up on its hind legs, if it's looking down into her window, and gee, maybe its back's parallel to the roof of the car. Oh my goodness! Do you know what kind of car she was driving?
I do not know. I asked around. The lady that cuts my hair is actually kin to several people who knew her, but nobody remembers what kind of car it was. But you know, back then, most people around here, this place tends to run about 10 years behind the rest of the country at least. So everybody's driving older cars, the big ones, so on and so forth. And I'm sorry, my lights just went out. Our power just went out.
Your power out? Yeah. Oh my goodness. Are you able to continue?
Oh yeah, I can continue. I just have I got the sun coming through my window for the lighting, but yeah, I'm cool.
Okay, cool. Yeah, we had that yesterday, evidently. I wasn't here. No, Saturday we had that. But yeah, somebody forgot to put the switch on for the summer setting, and it's almost like the grid can't handle it. And I'm like, well, it was handling it fine previous years. So, well, hopefully it comes back on here for you soon. But yeah,
Hey,
let's keep going.
let me try to pop this breaker right quick. Is that okay?
Yeah, go ahead and do it, man.
Okay, I got about 5 steps from the door of the room here, and the power came back on. It was just probably a grid problem with all the air conditioners being on.
Yep. Good deal. Good deal. All right, man. Continue with anything else. Let's go, man. This is awesome.
Well, I want to continue researching the local, not just the local history. I've got the history pretty much down pat now. There are still people coming forward with older stories. I've got several men in their 80s who have shared encounters with me. That occurred. Well, one in particular had an encounter in 1951, and then his father before him had several encounters, and his grandfather had several encounters. One in particular that was pretty horrifying in 1916. So I already knew, that the history of this dated back all the way to the Cherokee and the Catawba Indians. And there were several previous names that they called these Bigfoot in our area. They called them Wampus men, wood boogers. They called them boogers. They called them Fossey Mo. I don't know where they got that Fossey Mo. I'm not sure. But a lot of the old timers said they remembered their grandparents calling these creatures Fossey Mo.
Wow.
I have no clue what it means. But I want to. There's been a number of sightings since the 1978-1979 era, and I want to be able to meet some of these witnesses who came forward to the media and to law enforcement and get to interview them myself. And I've been able to do that with a couple of them, but it's you have to finesse people. You can't show up on their doorstep like you're with the local news channel, and you got to, as we say, act like you got some sense when you're trying to get the folks to talk to you, and you have to get to know people. So I hope to continue,
form relationships.
Yes, and I'm pretty good at. I'm a genuine person, and I love meeting people, and I love people. So as we speak, people continue to have encounters around here, and the sighting I told you about in August of 2017, that's not the only time I've saw one. A family member was here staying with me, and I won't say who it was because they have a sensitive job, and you know how that goes. But there was one in my house late at night, and this family member and my daughter got to see this. It was in my pasture, at the bottom of the pasture, just standing there, and it turned around like just real nonchalantly and stepped over the 4-foot fence and went back into the woods. Vocalizations.
Oh my goodness.
Vocalizations. Sometimes, I'll go 4 or 5 nights in a row and hear something when I'm outside at night, and I'm outside every night. I've got to, at minimum, be out there to walk my dogs, and I've got a lot of dogs, Bryan. I got 13 dogs.
Oh,
so
my.
The vocalizations range, every Bigfoot sound that you can think of, we've heard it here. I am certain that I've heard the dog man howling, and tree knocks.
What's that like now?
It's just,
Because I don't think
it
I've
sounds
ever heard a dog man.
it sounds like a nuclear charged wolf. I mean, at the end, it kind of resonates. The
Okay.
description of it sounding like yodeling. I can buy into that. That's kind of what it sounds like to me. And every time I've heard the howling, with the exception of one time, was always been really close to my
Okay.
property, and always at night. Um, but that's a terrifying sound. That's
Without a doubt.
that's
And I got a couple of questions for you. Because you just reminded me of something um, about being marked. Well, first of all, let's go back. I love finding out colors. That one you saw, the first one you saw, what color was it? About 8 footer? Was it black or?
it was it was very dark colored. I'm gonna say dark brown or black. It's hard to differentiate.
Okay.
I didn't really see any red for the split second that I had lights on it. That was just such a fleeting moment. But I didn't
Right.
recall seeing any red highlights or anything. The
Right.
one we saw in the pasture that night definitely had the red highlights for
Okay.
sure.
Okay. All right. The red highlights. So the second one was red highlights. All right. Now we're gonna get crazy. Because you said something that has sparked some interest, Jerry. Now, we're going to get a little bit of crazy talk here. Some people are going to be able to relate. My friend Greg Smith, who I just interviewed, he's episode 23. He calls me a woohoo when I do this kind of stuff, but he's very patient with me. Um, I Once, okay, we always talk about this on the NCI show. Let me talk about that. The Mothman Prophecies movie with Richard Gere, there's a quote in there. And the quote is you notice them and they notice that you notice them. Then they're paying more attention to us, so to speak. The bookmark or the moment where the light bulb went on off in my head is when I didn't see it, but a church patron saw a dog man about a year and a half ago in the church parking lot of a church here in Cairo, Michigan. What's so interesting about that is I had just started going to that church. Okay. I had started to have encounters here at the house. People have heard me talk about my mind speak experience. I didn't believe in mind speak, and then I had it. And so, what are your thoughts? It's almost like we're talking about to Doug Hycheck. And I had mentioned that to him because one of my Chippewa Indian friends said, well, you're marked. You're known now that you know about them, and they will come and check you out. So, with that said, what do you think about that? That type of marking that you notice them and now they're aware of you. And sometimes, well, like the fairy said to me, I've heard about you. And then the Bigfoot says, thanks for friendship, and they give me their name, or the one did that his name was Scout, and also said to me, we don't like to be called Bigfoot. We like to be called forest people. So just a chain of events, what is your thoughts on that process about possibly being known or marked by these paranormal creatures?
Well, I think that you're right. I believe that they do get comfortable with certain people, and you get marked. And I believe they can read your spirit. I believe they can somehow understand that your intentions are good or if your intentions are bad.
Yeah.
And I think that that's the reason that they'll come out late at night out of the woods, and they will come in. They actually come. They've beat on the house many times. Left things in the backyard. I think there's a group of juveniles who have come in a number of times and did mischievous things like strode my lawn furniture in the backyard, all over the backyard. They go into my barn and take things out of the barn and carry them out to the pasture. Sometimes they break into my feed barrels, and I guess they have them a snack. But I believe when I'm outside it.
We just did that episode too. I just remembered that. We just did an episode with you about some of the things you've caught on camera that are there, and then a few minutes later, they're not there. Yeah, talk about that a little bit. Maybe even an elemental showing its face. And, that's on that NCI episode, just last week or 2 weeks ago.
Yep. Yep. They are often there in the woods, just out of sight. I've seen the red eye shine. I've seen the green eye shine. I've heard many vocalizations from very close. I've heard them walking in the woods late at night. They know that I'm outside. And what was it? A month ago, I went to check on my pasture animals. I do that every night to make sure they're okay, to make sure they're up close to the barn. And all of my pasture animals were gathered on the eastern side of the pasture fence, which is very, very uncharacteristic. Normally, they will gather in the barn, or they will gather at the top of the hill in the northwest corner if they're afraid of something. Well, they were as far east against the fence as they could get, and they were looking in the same in a certain direction. So I got my spotlight and my cell phone, and it was obvious something spooked them. I knew what it was. And I caught movement as I was spotlighting off to my right, to the southwest. I caught movement enough to get my attention to that area. I didn't see what had moved and caught my attention, but I continued to look. And then I swept back to the east with the spotlight and came back, and I caught movement again. And this time I saw it a little better. But I thought I saw it inside an old riding ring set southwest of my pasture. And so I was concentrating on the inside of the riding ring. Well, lo and behold, just past the riding ring, downhill a little bit, was this, and I got this on video. I think I sent it to you. This, it's got to be 9 foot tall, and either white or gray Sasquatch.
Yep.
It was taller than the fence post, and the fence post down there is 6.5 feet tall.
Yeah, I freaked when you said that, but go ahead, man.
And one thing I had to factor in was the fact that it was standing about 10 or 15 feet on past that riding ring, and that's downhill. So I have to add about 3 feet to that. So it's a little bit taller than the fence post, but then you add 3 feet to it. So you're looking at over 9 feet. And it was white or gray. I wasn't using night vision or thermal or anything. And it showed itself because it wanted me to see it. It did that on purpose.
I agree.
And I believe they know that.
Go ahead. Yeah, I think you're being watched, man. We weren't sure if it was a UFO type craft above it. There was some weird type of light above it. Then you had that figure. Then you almost superimposed. It's like kind of clear. Tracy had brought up, it could have been an elemental face there as well. You seemingly had an onslaught of paranormal cryptid activity, and they were there checking in with you, checking you out, whatever, man. It was something.
It was a sudden just downpour of supernatural activity, and that face was as clear as it could be. I mean, that elemental, as Tracy called, that was as clear as it could be. So, and then there's a couple of the still shots from the video where it looked like there was a smaller one next to the tall one.
Okay. No way.
And then factor in, like you were saying, with the whatever in the background will look like kind of like a UFO or something hovering above the trees. But
Yeah. Yep.
that fits this area's um, it that kind of stuff happens here. It's just
Yeah.
at that
MO. Yeah. Modus operandi. Yeah.
yeah. It's I've seen the lights, the various different kinds of lights that we have here. You'll see ground lights. They call them jack-o'-lantern lights.
Okay.
Orange. They look like a camera flashbulb going on. Then you'll have lights in the
Right.
trees. I've saw lights. I've saw green lights. I've saw red lights, and I've saw blue lights. And then you have the lights in the sky that aren't aircraft, and they are either orange or white.
Okay.
That's not just for my little pocket of this area. That's the entire periphery of the South Mountains. People see those lights a lot. Now, here's the interesting thing. We have an intersection of ley lines right here in this area.
Ooh.
Now, that's what I want to learn more about are the ley lines.
Most definitely. Yeah, ley lines, certain minerals, certain type of rocks being bigger conductors of energy, and so possibly being more of a hotspot for paranormal activity. Um, hey, on the biological side, here in Michigan, we did have kind of up to a couple of 14-footer sightings. I know down in Georgia there was a 15-footer. So the average range of Sasquatch seems to be anywhere, the adolescents one or 5, 6 feet. But then here in Michigan, your average types are from around 8, 9 feet. Is that about it? About the same down there in North Carolina? Or, have you heard of any bigger ones?
Um, I think that ours on the average tends to run a little smaller. There
Okay.
was a guy who, interestingly enough, back in 2010, about 5 miles north of me, had one come into his backyard and was harassing his dogs. And it was white, and it was a little over 9 feet tall. But generally, around here, they're going to be between 6 to 8 foot tall. With your average sighting, the witness is going to usually put it at about 7 feet.
Okay. Okay. I think here, I'm not saying that I can't speak for all of Michigan. I'm learning as I go, as I meet the eyewitnesses. And see, I loved your approach because this is really not just about Bigfoot, but it's also about the eyewitnesses, their story, how it affected them. There are so many good people out there who might not even have believed in Bigfoot, and then they have an encounter, and then it shakes them to their core. And number one, they're not sure if they want to talk about it. And then, so I love your approach on it, that you're patient with people, you're open with people. They know that you're not going to make fun of them, that you're there to share the information and actually kind of console them and let them know that, hey, no, you're not crazy. You did see what you think you saw. Yeah, I think that's an important thing that we're doing as we run our investigations, as we meet new people, is to. I don't mean to sound corny, but it's a serious aspect that you create a comfortable space in order for people, and then you back them up. You really back them up and make sure that, hey, no, we're not going to make fun of you. We're not going to expose you. This is legitimate. This is for educational purposes. Really, it's for the increase of knowledge so people are aware that these creatures do exist. I wouldn't want, and I always say this, but I wouldn't want either of my boys to walk out in the woods and suddenly come face to face with something they never imagined before, because then that makes it worse. The shock and awe
Yeah.
factor, the PTSD is worse. So what my older one always laughs at me. You're just getting old and you're looking for something to do as you get closer to retirement. Bigfoot aren't real. He just told me that. I was talking to him the other day, because a guy was asking, hey, your dad believes in Bigfoot and he's doing this show. And, so people at my work are getting interested. And then they ask him, And he'll support all that and he'll be kind. But when they ask him, do you believe in Bigfoot? He'll be like, no, I'm not my dad. I don't believe in Bigfoot. But I rather be honest about what's going on. I'd rather share this knowledge. So even if you don't believe us, if you don't believe what you and I are doing, you have it in the back of your mind. That seed is planted. So then if you ever do have an encounter, whether it be a Bigfoot or a dog man or a UFO, that you're like, okay, wait a minute. So now let's talk a little bit about your thoughts. We're going to do a little bit of Christian talk here. One thing I tell everybody though is, look, if you're not a Christian, that's fine too. This doesn't have to be necessarily a Christian subject. It can be a biological, because now as I'm learning more, as I become more educated, I almost believe they're everything in between. I believe there are so many different kinds and species of these things that some of them have certain qualities or characteristic or abilities and others don't. You know, one of the things we talked about on one of the previous NCI shows with Doug Hychek is that the fact that some of these may be autistic like, you know, the intricacy of some of their behavior. They sat there with Doug Hychek and they went through 2 stacks of cards and tore them up into little itty bitty pieces. You know, us as normal humans, we're like, I don't have time for this. I got to move on to the next thing. So there are a lot of different personalities in the Bigfoot species, just like humans. There's different kind of humans. There's autistic humans. There's so much information there, and I think it all applies to the Sasquatch species because they do have, in my opinion, human DNA. That's from Dr. Melba Ketchum. You know, they have a woman's human DNA, and then an unknown father, which that, for me, leads into the biblical narrative. So what are your thoughts about the Christian connection of these creatures?
We have to understand that the good Lord didn't write the Bible and give it to us as a means of explaining everything to us and answering all our questions. There's so much that we don't know, especially about the spiritual side of creation, and we don't know the interface between the spiritual side and the physical side. We know that the Bible tells us that we are both physical and spiritual beings, and that the flesh or the physical self clashes with the spiritual side of us. But there's things that we have not learned, you know, through the Bible because the Lord didn't include it. Matter of fact, Deuteronomy chapter 29, verse 29 says, the secret things of the Lord belongs to the Lord. And he didn't explain everything to us. And we have all of these experiences, and we know we're not Bigfoot believers, we're Bigfoot knowers. And also you factor in all of other supernatural things, you know, the ghost, the UFOs, extraterrestrials, orbs. And you know, you remember the wood witch we talked about? Was you on that episode with us on the NCI show?
Yeah, I don't know if it was that particular episode, but I remember you guys talking about it a little bit. Go ahead.
So this lady reached out to me. She saw my show, and she saw one of the shows where I shared a lady had an encounter with 3 demonic entities. Now these demonic entities are popularly known as black-eyed children. But she saw that episode, and she reached out to me, and she said, I saw that episode, and it it really resonated with me. She said, because I had a visitor late at night during the partial lunar eclipse last year, and she said my life has been a wreck ever since. And she sent me video. She had this on video and still shots of this entity that came up to her door, very, very late at night, like 10 o'clock at night, something like that. And it wanted entry into her home. As a matter of fact, it worded it kind of weird. She said it almost spoke in an old-timey way and said, may I come in and warm myself in your home? And this entity that appeared to be a female had on period clothing from long ago. And my witness she said, I just had the creeps. And I told her no, she could not come in. And once she did that, this entity started screaming and wailing and then went off and disappeared. My witness shut the door and a few minutes later looked out the curtain and it was gone. I spoke with her back and forth over the telephone, over emails, and she finally said, this is over a year later and I still feel like I'm cursed or something. I said, well, I don't know if you're a Christian or not, but if you want my help as a Pentecostal evangelist, a preacher, I said, I will, but I'm coming at the problem with Jesus. And she said, that's great by me. And I went to the location where she lives and prayed, anointed the corners of her property with oil, anointed her with oil, just as the Bible talks about, and anointed the doorway of her house with oil. And she said she immediately felt like a black cloud was lifted over her. So that was where directly being a Christian and also being in this paranormal research end of things, there was this nexus. And they came together where I was able to help somebody with the supernatural problem and witness to them, in the name of the Lord Jesus at the same time.
Fantastic. Fantastic. I mean, yeah, so there's evidence, there's proof, and we believe it, of course. So my petition to people who are not Christian is all I'm saying is just then be aware of these kind of things for your own safety.
Exactly.
I get it. I get it. Your priorities are your family. Your priorities are your job. Your priorities are, everyday life is, Jesus says in the Bible, sufficient, give no thoughts for tomorrow because sufficient are the troubles of today, So people are busy. So this is another reason why I love doing the show, and doing the show with guys like you is because we're willing to take that extra time to just send out a message, a caution flag. And we're not saying all of these things are evil. We're saying there is a mixed bag. They do exist, and we're not exactly sure what all these things are. But, we're here to facilitate a conversation and just kind of send out an alarm and a message that, hey, people, just be careful because there might be something right behind you over your shoulder. So don't let it destroy your life. Just be aware.
I've had witnesses who have and came to me from the standpoint of being worried. One lady in particular, this has not been too awfully long ago. She had one in her backyard, and she backs up against the wilderness of the mountains. Her property backs up to a creek. They always travel the creeks, and she was kind of afraid. And she said she went out on her back porch. She saw this thing walking out of the woods and went over toward her horse that was in a enclosure, but then looked at her and then turned around and went back in the woods. And she was very, very frightened. And I said, in that case, you don't have a thing in the world to worry about. It saw you. It probably saw the fear in your eyes. It turned around and went back in. But I also caution people against, say, for example, going into the interior of the wilderness by themselves.
Oh, exactly.
Not a
Yeah,
good.
let me talk to. You're exactly right. Let me talk to that. I was just. I'm allowed to say I was by Grand Rapids, Michigan. I was with two eyewitnesses. Now, I promise not to give up the location, but there's a situation which is also similar to over here, my Black River Bigfoots. They have an area where they nest, and there's a division between that area and where you can see them, and that division is a river. Now, these Bigfoot and you'll see the episode coming up with Susan Moore and Linda Pomransky, that, these Bigfoots don't cause you much trouble unless you're a threat and might be coming over that river into there's, like Jessica Jones said, into their living room.
Right.
I don't want to, go walking on purposely into their nest or into their inner sanctum because, yeah, then you don't know how they're going to react. Good to see you, Jerry. I'm sorry your power went out. We'll keep talking as you go on.
No,
You're
it's,
a trooper.
keep talking. I'm going to go outside.
Okay. But
I'm going
it's
to go outside
exactly what
so
you're
you can
saying.
see it.
Oh, fantastic. Yeah, it's so don't get too cocky with these. Some people are so desperate, quote unquote, to get a body or get that physical evidence to show the world that they're doing dangerous things. For me, I'm like, look, I know they exist. I've got all the physical. I've had enough. Even if I were to never see one again or never get any encounters, I know they exist just because of all the evidence I found, which you can see in the TV pilot. I'm gonna tote myself real quick. The Bigfoots of Michigan TV pilot series. If you watch that, when I go out into the woods and I'm going where nobody's that and I find footprints, all the eyewitnesses, they're pointing me in the right direction. And then I go out
Right.
either with an eyewitness or by myself and I find the physical evidence. And then, like, oh my goodness. Yeah, what's today? Yeah, it's whatever, 2 days ago, where even though I didn't actually see a Bigfoot. I saw all the signs. We found a couple possible footprints. What's most intriguing to me is there's a bottleneck on one particular pathway, and you can see all the woven deer blinds. And people are, well, that's just deer hunters. Trust me, it's not deer hunters at this particular location. And there's a reason why, because it's private land. Oh, they can sneak out. Look, there's too many, first of all, too many eyewitnesses in this location. And then
Right.
as I was saying, you go down this bottleneck and you just see how the deer blinds are set up. They're actually like you've got one here, and then you've got one a little bit farther down, and then another one. And then the eyewitnesses, I'm trying to be vague, took me to another spot in that same general area where you could see tunnels through the brush, through the grass, where these things have literal networks of tunnels going back in, where they can get in, get out. Absolutely amazing. I pray, hope, and pray I can get back out there in the nighttime when they're more active. And yes, there's been physical sightings, and in this location too. So you got Bigfoot sightings in this general area. You've got Dogman sightings, and also Susan Moore had a pterodactyl sighting. So that correlated with another gal by the name of Christine Lee who had a pterodactyl sighting. And both were in the general time frame, like maybe the 1980s, out by Grand Rapids, Muskegon area. So there's something going on there. And then I think where you're at is ground central. See, here in Michigan, the reason why I believe, like, especially why they're in my area, is because of all the water that's plentiful. But our deer are huge. They're like horses up here because they feed on all the soybeans, all the corn, all the different types of crops we have here. The deer are well fed, so they grow and their backs are up over your car hood. And so when you hit one here, you're totaling out your car half the time. So I get it, but then I also understand why they're in North Carolina because they can hide in the hills, they can hide by the river system. Then you throw in the aspect of all the caves down there. My
Yep.
goodness. Speak a little bit more about your area. Is that why I think the Appalachian Mountains are really ground central?
Yeah. Well, you know what? Maybe this is fortuitous that my power went out and walked, uh, and I came outside. I've never done anything like this on a podcast before. Let's do something different. You ready?
Let's do it. Oh yeah, I'm game, man. I'm game.
All right. You see my backyard?
Yes, sir.
So wilderness in every direction.
Oh my goodness.
And then, just to the north of me, about 5 miles, you come to the base of the South Mountains themselves. And this wilderness area here, I have 2 creeks that traverse my property, which are, creek bottoms. They always follow the creeks. And then we have a major creek that runs just below my house here. And then there's the Broad River. So we've got all these waterways. And why this is a hot spot, I think has to do with the lay of the land and the fact that we're at the conjunction of several creeks. They feed into a bigger creek, which feeds into the river. I don't know if we've talked about it on the NCI show or not, but the deer kills that we find here. And I'm talking a 10-minute walk into the woods from my house. These so many deer that I found that were killed. They have broken ribs, limbs torn off, broken necks. Me and George and Tim found part of the remains up about 7.5 feet in a holly tree.
Oh my goodness.
It was put there to catch our attention, and the jawbone of the deer was hanging about 6 feet up on a small sapling, and then there was 2 tree breaks right beside that kill. But
wow,
more than a dozen of these deer that we found in these areas. One of 2 areas. Okay, there's 2 sites. Both of them are classic areas where it's a funnel, it's in a bottom or a little valley, and they can funnel the deer in and have a couple watchers waiting, and the chasers chase the deer into the funnel, and then they just ambush the deer and manhandle them, break their necks, break their legs, and predate on them. And that's we've got a lot of deer. Now they're not big deer like you guys have. We have just got so many. Okay. And the food source is plentiful. The lay of the land permits them to do that style of hunting, where they can just basically run them into a funnel and then attack them.
Fantastic. Dogs. Do you real quick, say somebody doesn't know much about Bigfoot. Let's deal with this for just a moment for me, because you made me think about something. Their style of hunting. Are these creatures, these beasts, are they solitary or what? Do they run in families?
They run in families and for sure clans. But I think that there are sometimes, like I mentioned earlier in the show, one of them will kind of go rogue, kind of break off from the main group. Here I think that we have 3 clans in my general area. One lives in the north of me, one lives southwest near the big river, and then a clan lives down here by this larger sized creek that I spoke of a while ago.
Okay.
But it's like,
yeah, see that was something we were talking about in the episode I filmed. It's the big lie. The big lie, there were 2 lies. The first one was that Bigfoot doesn't exist, all right? Well, now as we're getting more educated, we do realize that Bigfoot exists. Then the second lie was, well, if he does exist, the old joke, oh, you saw Bigfoot? Where's he at now? Well, that's the idea that, they're very few and far between. Oh, yeah, there might be a couple of remnants of Gigantopithecus out west or something like that. That's the second lie. Because these things run in family clans, and there are way more. Just such a bigger population of these things than we ever imagined. So right in your area, you're figuring you got 3 clans.
But yeah, just in the immediate area of where I live. Now, if you get on into the South Mountains, there's no telling how many are up in those mountains. That's 100,000 acres of absolutely thick forest, crisscrossed by streams and rivers. And I could take a platoon of soldiers and go into these woods, and if we didn't want to be seen, we'd never be seen.
Wow.
So there's no telling how many, as far as the numbers go, how many are in this whole area of the South Mountains, because that encompasses parts of 4 counties, and And then all the like I'm on the periphery of it, and all the peripheral forest around the South Mountains. You know, you're tacking on another 100,000 acres of wilderness easy, and we can go, you know, contiguously all the way into the big. We're in the foothills, but other than crossing a road here or there, I mean, we could walk through the woods into the big mountains, and if we didn't want to be spotted during our trip, we wouldn't be seen. So we're connected to the big mountain.
Fantastic. So, okay, so I had a thought process, and I love it when people are courageous. I love it when they speak their minds. I have been a little bit reserved with my train of thought, and I would think, well, maybe there's thousands here in Michigan, maybe, but definitely not tens of thousands. And then, okay, what you're talking about, there could be thousands, and this is just my thought process. There could be thousands down in Appalachia, right? I got to say that correct.
Appalachia.
Appalachia. Oh, what? Say it again.
Appalachia.
Okay, Appalachia. All
There
right,
you
I'm going to
go.
work on that. Awesome. I'm going to work on that. Um, but I loved it that my eyewitness, Susan Moore, over the weekend wasn't afraid to say that she believes there could be millions of these things worldwide. Now, we're talking, you know, the Yowie in Australia, up through Europe, all the different species. She believes there could be in the millions. What are your thoughts about that?
Yeah, I mean, worldwide, gosh, that's almost an insurmountable question because
Yeah.
they're in so many parts of the world, and there's so many areas of the world that's just vast wilderness. You think about
Yeah.
Siberia alone, how huge Alaska is, um, the Pacific Northwest, and those great forests. I wouldn't have any problem thinking there could be millions of them worldwide.
Awesome, awesome, and I like it because it breaks that second lie I was talking about. That there's not that many of them. You know, we've broken the first lie. Now we have too many people, too many eyewitnesses, too much data. There's Bigfoot conferences all over. I love it. Bigfoot eyewitnesses speaking. There's our shows where people come on. You interview eyewitnesses. I interview them. So for me, that first lie is just about broken. Anybody who wants to deny it is lying to themselves. Now, I love the aspect of dealing with how many could there, I don't care if millions is too much or not. It gets us out of the train of thought there's only a few of these things. So,
I have heard as many as 6 at one time vocalizing in basically a giant circle around my area. That's only happened once. The 6 was the most. But it's
okay.
routine that I'll hear at least 3 communicating at distance from various
Oh,
places.
oh, fantastic. Wow. Well, Jerry, listen, man. You know what time of day it is for me. You know what I got to do? I got to start getting ready and getting out of here. And I know we're going to do another episode, man. And I see every Tuesday, Thursday. So you're such a good friend. I appreciate you taking the time to be on my show. Anything I can help you out with your show, you let me know. I'm praying and hoping God makes a way for me to get down there and meet all of you in person. I think that's what we're supposed to do. So I just appreciate who you are, my friend. So with all that said, thanks again for being on the show. Can you tell everybody at home, and this is very important to me, that you tell everybody where they can connect with you. So good, go ahead and tell our audience where they can connect with you.
And just let me say, I appreciate you being a friend, and I appreciate you having me on the show. And if you want to do another episode, just say the word. You can
Fantastic. Can't wait.
find my show, The Strange and Unexplained Phenomena of the South Mountains of North Carolina, on TikTok at J.R. Millwood, Millwood, or you can put in the search engine there in TikTok, Nobby, Knobby, and you'll see my face pop up on some videos under Nobby. And now the same stories are on YouTube. It's just a different name, and I'm leaving room for expansion. I'm going to eventually talk about encounters throughout the Appalachian Mountains. But on YouTube, my show is Rebels Dark Tales of Appalachia. And then I'm on Facebook, Jerry Millwood Jr. And you can reach out to me on any of those platforms.
Fantastic. All right, man. Thank you, my friend. You know the story. Just kind of hang around. I'm going to put you backstage, and I will see you in a moment. All right, everybody. You know, to everybody out there listening to the show, watching us on YouTube, you can listen to us on Spotify, Pandora, Amazon Podcasts, Apple Podcasts, and then I think as well Stitcher. So everybody who's tuning in on all these different platforms, on our private member groups on Facebook, which is the Bigfoots of Michigan, Bigfoots of America private group, and then we also have the public group, the Bigfoots of America podcast show. So you can join us on any of those. We're on Instagram, my goodness, TikTok, all of those. I'm Bryan Sawyer on Facebook. You can contact me there, or you can send me an email at Bigfoots of America or Bigfoots with an S, Bigfoots of America or Bigfoots of Michigan at gmail.com. If you've had a sighting, you want to be on the show, you want to be on the TV pilot series, just send me an email and I will give you I like to do phone interviews, talk to people first, get the lowdown, and then we line you up for an episode. But to everybody out there listening to our show, watching our show, I thank you so very much. We have so much more content coming. We're meeting so many people throughout the paranormal community talking about Bigfoot, Dogman, fairies, whatever. There are so many different types of creatures. And even from ancient folklore and Roman mythology or Greek mythology, these creatures that we thought were just fables, well, guess what? They might actually exist. But all of you out there paying attention to our show, we thank you so very much. And as always, stay tuned for more of the Bigfoots of America podcast show.